The departure board inside Atlanta International Airport flashed one word beside Flight 482 to Washington, D.C. boarding. Passengers lined up neatly at gate C-17, rolling suitcases behind them and holding coffee cups as the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Among them stood the Johnson family. Marcus Johnson adjusted the strap of his travel bag while his wife Denise held their youngest daughter's hand. Their teenage son Caleb stood beside them scrolling through his phone. They looked like any other family traveling for the weekend. Marcus wore a clean navy blazer and jeans. Denise carried a small purse and a folder of travel documents. The kids laughed quietly about something on Caleb's phone. Everything felt normal until they reached the gate agent. The woman behind the counter scanned Denise's boarding pass first. Her polite smile faded almost instantly. She scanned Marcus's pass next, then Caleb's, then the youngest daughter's. Her eyebrows tightened. "Excuse me," the agent said slowly, her tone suddenly cold. "Could you step to the side for a moment?" Marcus blinked. "Is there a problem?" "Just a quick document check," she replied, already waving the next passenger forward. The Johnson family stepped aside as the line behind them continued boarding. Marcus watched passenger after passenger walk down the jet bridge. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Denise leaned closer to her husband. "Why are we waiting?" Marcus shrugged uneasily. Finally, Marcus approached the counter again. "Ma'am, you asked us to step aside. Is there an issue with our tickets?" The agent looked up with clear irritation. "Yes, actually." She lowered her voice, but not enough to keep nearby passengers from hearing. "There is something unusual about your reservation." Marcus frowned. "Unusual how?" The agent folded her arms. "Well, for starters, your seats were upgraded to business class this morning." Marcus nodded. "That is correct. And that upgrade usually requires verification," she continued. Denise blinked in confusion. Verification of what? The agent gave a thin smile. Of eligibility. A few passengers nearby began watching. Marcus kept his voice calm. "I do not understand." "We paid for the tickets weeks ago," the agent said. "But upgrades like this are often special accommodations." Marcus felt the tension building. "Are you saying our tickets are not valid?" "I am saying," the agent replied sharply, "that I need to confirm how you received them." The implication hung in the air. Denise's voice tightened. "We received them because my husband earned them." The agent sighed dramatically. "Sir, I am going to need you and your family to remain here while I contact security and verify your reservation." Marcus froze. Security? Now more passengers were staring. His son Caleb whispered, "Dad, what is going on?" Marcus kept his voice steady. "We're just sorting something out." But inside, anger was rising. They watched the last group of passengers board the plane. The gate area became almost empty. Still, the agent typed slowly on her computer. Finally, Marcus spoke again. "Our flight is boarding. Can we get on the plane?" The agent shook her head. "Not until I finish verifying your situation." 10 more minutes passed. Then 2 airport security officers approached. Denise's eyes widened. "Marcus," one officer spoke first. "Sir, we have been asked to verify your travel documentation." Marcus slowly handed over their IDs. The officer examined them carefully. Everything was valid. Everything matched. Still, the gate agent leaned over the counter. "I told you something looked suspicious." The officer raised an eyebrow. Suspicious how?" She lowered her voice. "For business class upgrades at the last minute. For this reservation." Marcus finally spoke. "You mean for my family?" The officer glanced between them. "Sir, how did you receive the upgrades?" Marcus answered calmly. "The airline issued them." The gate agent scoffed. "That is what he says." At that moment, something unexpected happened. The jet bridge door opened. A tall man in a pilot's uniform walked out. Captain Robert Hayes. He had overheard the conversation from the cockpit through the open aircraft door. The captain approached the counter. "Is there a problem here?" The gate agent straightened immediately. "Oh, Captain Hayes. Just handling a verification." He looked at the Johnson family, then at the security officers. "Verification of what?" She hesitated. "Well, their reservation raised a concern." Captain Hayes looked directly at Marcus. "Sir, are you passengers on Flight 482? Marcus nodded. "Yes." The captain turned back to the agent. "Then why are they not boarding?" She shifted nervously. "There are irregularities." Captain Hayes folded his arms. "What irregularities?" The agent glanced at her computer screen. "The system flagged their upgrade. The captain's voice hardened. Flagged it. For what? The agent hesitated again. Finally, she muttered, "It just did not seem typical." The captain stared at her. Then he looked at Marcus again. "Sir, may I ask your name?" "Marcus Johnson." The captain's expression changed instantly. Recognition flashed across his face. "Marcus Johnson?" Marcus nodded. The captain suddenly laughed. Not a mocking laugh. A surprised one. He turned back to the gate agent. "You are holding Marcus Johnson from boarding." The agent looked confused. "Yes, why?" The captain shook his head slowly. Then he addressed the security officers. "You can clear this immediately." They looked relieved. But the gate agent protested. "Captain, company policy requires." He cut her off. "Company policy also requires respect for passengers." The terminal grew quiet. The captain turned back to Marcus. "Sir, are you traveling to Washington for the Pentagon ceremony tomorrow?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Yes." Now the gate agent looked completely lost. "What ceremony?" The captain looked at her. "The Air Force Veterans Leadership Conference." Then he added something that changed the entire atmosphere. "Marcus Johnson is the keynote speaker." Passengers nearby gasped, but the captain was not finished. He looked back at Marcus, former Air Force test pilot, 2 combat tours, Silver Star recipient. Denise squeezed her husband's arm. The gate agent's face turned pale. Marcus spoke quietly. "I do not usually bring that up." The captain nodded respectfully. "I know." Then, the captain faced the gate agent again. "And those upgrades?" He tapped the counter. "They were issued personally by airline headquarters." The agent blinked. "Why?" The captain answered simply. "Because this airline is honoring him." The silence in the terminal was heavy. The security officers stepped back immediately. But the captain added one more thing. "And there is another reason." He turned toward the aircraft door, then raised his voice slightly. "Crew, could you step out here for a moment?" Within seconds, the entire flight crew appeared. 2 flight attendants, the first officer, even the lead purser. They all stood behind the captain. The gate agent looked stunned. Captain Hayes spoke clearly so everyone could hear. "This is the man who trained half the Air Force pilots flying today." He gestured toward Marcus. "And he is the reason I am standing here." The captain smiled. "He was my instructor 20 years ago." Gasps spread through the terminal. The captain continued. "When we heard he was on this flight, the crew agreed on something." The gate agent shifted nervously. "What?" The captain's voice became firm. "If Marcus Johnson and his family are not on this plane." He paused. "Neither are we." The terminal went silent. Passengers stared in disbelief. The captain continued calmly. "We will not fly without them." The first officer nodded. "So will I." The flight attendants stepped forward. "Same here." The message was clear. The entire crew had taken a stand. The gate agent looked like she might faint. She quickly printed new boarding passes. "Mr. Johnson, I apologize for the delay." Marcus accepted the passes calmly. Denise whispered, "That is it." Marcus simply smiled. The captain stepped aside. "Sir, your plane is ready." The Johnson family walked toward the jet bridge. As they passed, several passengers quietly clapped. Then more joined. Soon, the entire gate was applauding. Maftas paused before entering the aircraft. He turned back to the captain. "You did not have to do that." Captain Hayes shook his head. "Yes, I did." Marcus smiled. The family boarded the plane, and this time, they were treated exactly as they deserved, with respect. And when Flight 482 finally took off for Washington, D.C., the entire cabin knew one thing. Sometimes standing up for what is right does not just change a moment, it changes everyone watching it. But the story didn't end when the plane took off. Once the Johnson family settled into their seats in business class, the atmosphere on the plane felt different. Passengers who had witnessed the situation at the gate were still whispering among themselves. A woman sitting across the aisle leaned toward Denise. "I'm so sorry that happened to your family," she said softly. Denise gave a polite smile. "Thank you. We are just glad it's over." But Marcus quietly looked out the window as the aircraft taxied toward the runway. He had experienced moments like that before. Not always that obvious, but enough times to recognize the pattern. Caleb finally spoke. "Dad, why did they think our tickets were fake?" Marcus turned toward his son. "They didn't think they were fake," he said calmly. Caleb frowned. "Then why did they stop us?" Marcus paused for a moment before answering. "Sometimes people see what they expect to see." His daughter looked confused. "What does that mean?" Denise gently stepped in. It means that sometimes people judge before they understand. The plane began accelerating down the runway. Within seconds, the city of Atlanta shrank beneath the clouds. Once the aircraft reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign turned off. Moments later, the lead flight attendant approached their seats. She carried a small tray with 4 glasses of sparkling cider. "Compliments of the captain," she said warmly. The kid's eyes lit up. "Wow," Caleb said. The attendant smiled. "And Mr. Johnson," the captain asked if you would be willing to stop by the cockpit later. Marcus chuckled. "I think I can manage that." Across the cabin, several passengers kept glancing toward Marcus. Word had spread quickly. The man who had been stopped at the gate was not just another traveler. He was someone with a story. About 30 minutes into the flight, the captain made an announcement. His voice filled the cabin speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Hayes speaking." Passengers listened quietly. "I would like to take a moment to recognize a special passenger on today's flight." Marcus sighed softly. Denise nudged him. "You are famous now?" she whispered. The captain continued. "Many of you may have noticed a delay during boarding earlier today." Passengers chuckled quietly. "Well, the gentleman involved in that delay is actually someone who helped shape my career." Marcus rubbed his forehead. "Here we go." Captain Hayes continued proudly. "Marcus Johnson was my flight instructor during my early years in the Air Force." Several passengers gasped. "And like many pilots flying today, I learned from his experience, his discipline, and his leadership." The captain paused before finishing. "So, on behalf of this entire crew, we are honored to have him and his family on board today." The cabin erupted in applause. Marcus shook his head, smiling awkwardly. Caleb whispered excitedly, "Dad, this is insane." Marcus laughed quietly. "I promise it wasn't like this when I flew cargo planes." An hour later, Marcus stepped into the cockpit. Captain Hayes turned around in his seat with a grin. "Good to see you again, sir." Marcus shook his hand. "Robert, you do not have to call me sir anymore." The captain laughed. "I probably always will." They talked for several minutes about flying old training days and mutual friends from the Air Force, but eventually the captain grew more serious. "I heard what happened at the gate before I came out," he said. Marcus nodded. "It happens." The captain shook his head. "It shouldn't." Marcus leaned against the cockpit doorway. "Robert, moments like that are not new to me." The captain looked surprised, "Even after everything you have accomplished." Marcus smiled sadly. "Sometimes accomplishments do not matter to people who have already decided who you are." The captain was quiet for a moment. "Well," he said finally, "today they learned something." Marcus looked at him. "What's that?" "That they were wrong." 2 hours later, the plane began its descent into Washington, D.C. As passengers prepared to land, the woman across the aisle leaned over again. "I'm glad your family stayed on this flight," she said. Marcus smiled. "Us too." When the plane touched down and taxied to the gate, something unexpected happened. Again, passengers did not rush to stand up like usual. Instead, many stayed seated. As Marcus and his family stood to leave, people along the aisle began clapping again. Not loudly, but sincerely. One passenger shook Marcus's hand. "Thank you for your service." Another nodded respectfully. "Glad the crew stood up for you." Marcus thanked them quietly as the family stepped off the aircraft. At the end of the jet bridge, Captain Hayes waited. He gave Marcus a firm handshake. "Good luck at the ceremony tomorrow." Marcus smiled. "Thanks for having our backs today." The captain shook his head. "No," he said. "You earned that respect a long time ago." The Johnson family walked into the terminal together. And for the first time that day, everything finally felt normal again. But one thing was certain. Everyone who had witnessed what happened at Gate C-17 would remember it for a long time, because sometimes a single moment in an airport can reveal something much bigger, not just about prejudice, but about courage, about respect, and about the power of people who refuse to stay silent when something is not right.